is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thanks very much for joining us. We're following multiple stories right now, including selective silence. President Trump blasting Senator Al Franken on the Democrats' sexual harassment scandal, but still silent on the multiple sexual accusations against Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore. Candidate Roy Moore, now the president's attack, bringing his past into the spotlight. Plus, Al Franken's political fate up in the air as top Democrats say expulsion is possible. Now, several other Democrats saying they made a mistake when it comes to Bill Clinton. And missing documents. Investigators say Jared Kushner hasn't turned over all of his emails, specifically relating to WikiLeaks. And now, the special counsel Robert Mueller dropping a subpoena on the Trump campaign. But we begin with the tale of two responses. President Trump goes after Senator Al Franken over accusations of sexual harassment, but on the allegations that Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore pursued teenage girls while he was in his 30s, silence. The president blasted Franken over this photo that shows him appearing to grope Leanne Tweeden while she slept. The two were flying back from a USO trip to the Middle East back in 2006. The president tweeted this: "The Al Frankenstein misspelled, by the way, picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps?" Our White House correspondent Sarah Murray is joining us now. Sarah, what's behind the selective silence by the president?
Well, Wolf, it is a little bit bizarre that the president has not weighed in on Roy Moore. He certainly dodged questions on this issue, although the White House has made clear the president feels like Alabama voters need to make a decision on Moore and that it's not up to the president, for instance, to suggest he step aside. But then we saw this president's tweet on Al Franken, and it inserts the president in a very partisan way on an issue that has really crossed the partisan divide here. Campaign, more than a dozen women accused the president of some kind of inappropriate sexual behavior, and the president essentially came out and called them liars. So it certainly puts a spotlight back on that again today. You know, the president drew attention to this photograph with Al Franken, and that drew a lot of comparisons and a lot of questions about, you know, if we should believe this photograph, why shouldn't we believe that old Access Hollywood tape where the president is suggesting he can grab women because he's famous? Obviously, he was not the president at the time. He got elected in spite of that, but it certainly is putting the limelight back on those allegations, Wolf.
All right, Sarah's over at the White House. We'll get back to you, Sarah Murray. Thanks very much. Let's discuss all of this and more with our panel. We have our CNN legal analyst, former federal prosecutor Laura Coates is with us. Our CNN political commentators, Rick Santorum and Anna Navarro, are here, and our CNN political analyst, David Gregory. So what do you make of the president? He's going after Senator Al Franken, staying silent when it comes to the Republican Senate candidate in Alabama, Roy Moore. The charges against the president, a serious charge of hypocrisy.
Yeah, there's hypocrisy all around. I don't think President Trump is easily shamed. I don't think he particularly cares about the fact that he's inviting renewed attention to the allegations against him. He's happy to go against a Democratic senator for hypocrisy here. And I think on Roy Moore, I mean, he's for all the reasons we've talked about in the past few days, there's a lot of political sensitivity about how Republicans are putting pressure on Moore, knowing that the president could do a lot to affect the outcome here. And he frankly thinks it's too politically dicey to do it, or else he'd do it. He doesn't have a lot of restraint otherwise, aside from the fact that he's made a decision here.
What do you think, Rick?
Well, I think it was a mistake for him to weigh into this. It points attention to something that the president shouldn't want pointed attention to, which is his own accusations. So it was an unwise decision by the president. If it does leave open that now he's sort of almost in a position where he has to comment on the Roy Moore situation, and it seems pretty clear in Alabama that the people of Alabama, at least the Republican Party of Alabama, is circling the wagons. They're not going to abandon him. They're going to see this through. And so now the president's could be put in a position to be at odds with them.
There were at least a dozen women who, during the campaign came forward and made sexual accusations against the president. One woman, Jessica Leeds, she spoke to Anderson Cooper in October of last year, and she said that Donald Trump groped her during a flight back in the 1980s. Listen to this.
Then after a bit, that's when his hands started going. I was wearing a skirt, and his hands started going towards my knee and up my skirt. And that's when I said, I don't need this. And I got up.
President, as you remember, then the candidate said all of those women, about a dozen or so, were lying.
Yes, and you know something? I actually think the election of Donald Trump has a lot to do with this empowerment of women and women speaking out that we are seeing in the last year. Women could have either seen his election as a defeat for women who spoke out about sexual harassment. Instead, I think they saw it as a call to action, and you are seeing a strength in numbers that is turning this into a watershed moment and changing the culture across every industry. Today, I saw that the chair of the Democratic Party in Florida was accused this morning of inappropriate behavior and had resigned by mid-morning, by late morning. And I think it's very powerful when people in your own party call you out. It's what the Democrats did in Florida today, all the ones running for governor, and the guy was gone in a matter of hours. What you're seeing with Donald Trump is three things: hypocrisy, politics, and stupidity. It is hypocritical of him to call out Al Franken when he's not calling out Roy Moore. It is politics, what he's playing, because he doesn't want to go against his base in Alabama. And it is stupid because, as Rick says, the only thing it does is highlight his own baggage on this issue.
He not only said, Laura, that all these women who were coming out last year during the campaign were lying, but he also said he was going to file lawsuits against them. Listen to this. This is what he said last October.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. Total fabrication. The events never happened. Never. All of these liars will be sued after the election is over.
All right, so no lawsuits yet have been filed, and it's doubtful any will be filed.
In fact, that's correct. And a lot of that is because he's opened himself up to defamation actions against himself for calling these women liars and saying that your reputation should be undermined by my commentary. But, you know, it's interesting, his comments about that seem to have now become a guidebook for other people who are accused. Notice that Roy Moore has not attacked the explicit credibility of the victim. They've gone after the alleged victim. They've gone after the attorney, Gloria Allred, her connections to Roe v. Wade. They talked about the yearbook may not being genuine or not. And so they are aware of the idea of not actually coming into fruition this threat about a lawsuit. And also what happens when you attack the credibility of the alleged victim means that you renew statute of limitations in civil lawsuits and say, well, the criminal thing is expired now, but now I invite some scrutiny in a different respect in terms of maybe defamation or legal liability. You think he's going to file any lawsuits? It's been more than a year.
Well, I don't think the President of the United States is going to file a lawsuit. I mean, he won the election. That issue's been resolved. The American public came down in his favor. I don't think he needs a court of law to do the same. Look, this is as Anna was saying, I mean, this is a tumultuous time. You're seeing all sorts of recriminations now in Washington, D.C. You're seeing not just Hollywood. I was interviewed by TMZ the other day. I mean, my goodness, here in Washington, I wonder what they're looking into. So this is a real big problem. But I look at it for men in particular to take a step back and think about their behavior, period. And it only takes a few of your colleagues and your friends losing positions and being outed, if you will, to begin to change behavior. And maybe in the end there could be a good message out of this that we're gonna start to see a little bit more respect.
The point that we've been talking about, the thing that's so dangerous about this is that let's not muck up an already really tough moment by somehow making some sort of partisan fight. Hypocrisy is certainly, in the air. There's no question about that. But to your point, which is, people in their own parties need to reckon with this behavior. A lot of what's going on about rethinking, the reaction to Bill Clinton is part of that. Democrats have to reckon with their defensiveness of him and the way they treated women.
Yeah, I remember during that time, I was called a prude because somehow or another this was, get over it. I mean, it has nothing to do with your job. And so, whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. And of course, obviously, much of it was very true. And so
I think there's a lot of...
On this issue of Bill Clinton, I want to play a clip. Anna, this is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. She's a Democrat, and she was questioned about her attitude as far as Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky scandal that all of us remember was concerned. Listen to this exchange she had with the New York Times.
Is it your view that President Clinton should have stepped down at that time, given the allegations?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response. But I think things have changed today, and I think under those circumstances, there should be a very different reaction. And I think in light of this conversation, we should have a very different conversation about President Trump and a very different conversation about allegations against him.
All right, Anna, go ahead.
I think that was a very honest, blunt assessment and answer by Kristen Gillibrand. And I think it's a question that a lot of us are asking ourselves about Bill Clinton. And, you know, did we go too easy on him? Did people go too hard on his accusers? Was there victim shaming when that happened? Look, a lot of things have changed in the past 20 years. A lot of things have changed in the past 20 months. A lot has changed regarding sexual harassment in the past 20 weeks and 20 days. And it's a very different panorama today than it was then. I actually think this is an opportunity for Bill Clinton to change his legacy. This is going to be part of his obituary. It's going to be part of his legacy. It's going to be part of his history. And I actually think that this is a time for him to reflect on how that was treated, what he did. He might want to consider doing a public apology, a little reflection, and having, you know, some wise words for people and talking about why what he did was wrong. And I actually think he should take the opportunity right now to apologize to those women because they were dragged through the mud back in the day.
Well, you know, I agree with you. Obviously, Monica Lewinsky in particular carries a scarlet letter that has not been imprinted on Bill Clinton. However, when you talk about the notion of apology, I deal with the court of law, obviously, but the court of public opinion reigns here. And if you look at the track record so far, those who have showed contrition recently, those who have made apologies, the consequences that have come down upon them, either through threats of being, the consequences that have come down upon them, either through threats of being expelled if they do take the Senate, or Al Franken in terms of the ethics committee, et cetera, or Louis C.K., and the list goes on and on. I think that at the same time where we're incentivizing people to come forward, we are probably de-incentivizing people to actually be contrite, actually show remorse, and have an opinion on it. And when doing so, you realize that the playbook is set now. You've got Roy Moore denying wholeheartedly what's happened. You've got Donald Trump doing the same thing. In the court of public opinion, never going to have the chance to show credibility.
Let me tell you something. 93, no, but let me just say this. 93-year-old George Herbert Walker Bush, you know, who is wheelchair bound and who is frail, is apologizing for having touched women in the rear end.
No, they should apologize,
if
Anna.
the 93-year-old can do it, I think Bill Clinton can do it because I think he can actually make a difference in this debate right now. It'd be good for him. It'd bring some closure to those women, and I think it would get us rid of this entire, you know, hypocrisy issue.
I agree. My point is not that they should not apologize or show remorse or admit to poor conduct. I think that they should do so. My thing is that we're talking about what Rick was saying. It is a joint effort to change society. If the idea is simply to allege, well, that wouldn't work in a court of law. We'd have to allege and then have a solution or have an actual outcome coming into place. And so for me, I think society, if we're going to have court of public opinion reign supreme, the allegation and the apology, as well as moving beyond that, if it's going to simply be vilification continued, you haven't done much with the apology.
I just think it's important, too, what Rick was saying. This is a moment for men in all kinds of different realms of life to take stock. You know, when sexual harassment, this is not the first time it came up. I mean, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, it had another moment. And there was a lot of thinking, oh, well, now you're just going to have to be really careful as a guy. And it was all about kind of, you know, that you'll be unjustly accused. I think part of this moment is that women are being believed. And so they're feeling more confident about coming forward and in greater numbers. And immediately, I mean, Al Franken said, yeah, you know, this happened and it was wrong and I apologize. That has not been the case. It's not what Roy Moore is doing. In his case is in a different situation because of, you know, these girls who are involved. But I think it's partly about truly getting it instead of just thinking about it in terms of, well, we need a new kind of realm of training. It's really understanding, well, what is this behavior? It's not just how to be careful with them. It's what is the behavior.
Good manners. It's called proper moral behavior, and maybe that could be a good thing that comes out of all this.
Right, so everybody stand by. There's a lot more developing right now. Another scandal, I should say, another party as pressure builds on the Senate candidate in Alabama, Roy Moore. His wife now speaking out in his defense as they declare war on Republicans here in Washington. Plus, what Senate investigators are now demanding of Jared Kushner after they say he failed to turn over some missing documents. And politics getting rather personal. See what happens. What happened when two senators broke out in a rather extraordinary shouting match.
We do attack
order.
middle class.
Wait a minute. Regular order.
And over again. How many times do we do this before we learn this?
Moore's defense comes as a new Fox News poll shows the mounting accusations against her husband are having a serious impact on his chances of actually winning the special election on December 12th. According to the poll, Democrat Doug Jones is now leading Moore by 8 points, well outside the margin of error. Let's talk about the upcoming election, the growing scandal in Alabama. Joining us, the Secretary of State of Alabama, John Merrill. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me as your guest, Wolf. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. You were on our show last Friday. At that time, you wouldn't say whether you thought Moore should step down. You said you wanted more information, which was understandable. Since then, at least 3 more women have come forward. We've also learned from a former mall employee down there in Alabama that Moore was on a so-called mall watch list, allegedly for approaching teenage girls. Is this enough information for you now?
Well, Wolf, I think it's very important for your viewers to be reminded that this is a very, very difficult time for the state of Alabama. It's a very difficult time for our people. And of course, as these allegations continue to mount and they continue to be vetted and investigated, not just by CNN and the other major networks, but by the people of Alabama themselves, I believe that that will put them in a much stronger position to make a more well-informed decision when their time comes to vote on December the 12th.
So have you decided yet whether you believe he should step down or stay in the race?
Well, I still am not sure whether or not these allegations are true. I know that they are very damning and they're very damaging. And the thing that's the most frustrating and the most disappointing is that these allegations reflect very poorly on Judge Moore and on our state as a whole, because Judge Moore is the Republican standard bearer in the United States Senate race. And because of that, for more than a week now, it's put Alabama in a very difficult position and a very damaging position nationwide as far as the spotlight is concerned. That's not something that we're very proud of.
So it sounds as if you might be relieved if he were to step down. Am I drawing the wrong conclusion?
Well, Wolf, I think it's very important to note that when our people have their voice heard and their votes are counted on December the 12th, that I think it'll be very clear how they process this information and what they believe should take place and who needs to represent us in Washington, D.C. to fulfill the remaining time in Senator Sessions' unexpired term.
We're just learning, Mr. Secretary, that the Republican Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell's office, is getting ready to send the White House a memo on the various options going forward in Alabama, including legal options that would prevent the runoff election from actually taking place or keeping Moore from being seated. What's your reaction when you hear that?
Wolf, I don't think any of those things are even worth discussing, because we have shown in the past, we continue to show now, that we know how to manage our elections. We know how to ensure that we have safe and secure elections with integrity and credibility. That's what we do in the Office of Secretary of State. That's what Governor Ivey has guaranteed. That's why Governor Ivey is not going to change the elections process in midstream. Our state law does not allow for a substitute candidate to be provided on the ballot as a Democrat or a Republican, because we're within that 76-day window. The state party has indicated that they intend to continue to support Judge Moore in a formal way. And I think it's very clear that on December the 12th, the 2 candidates that are there, Judge Roy Moore and the lawyer Doug Jones, will be the candidates for the people of Alabama to consider.
But there's still a possibility there could be a write-in candidate, right?
Most definitely. And of course, what we're doing is we're trying to educate the voters in the state of Alabama. We'll have information prepared at the polling site on December the 12th. So if they want to write in a candidate other than the 2 that are given to them on the ballot, they'll know where to do it, how to do it, and to make sure that their vote is counted if they submit that name.
You're a Republican, Mr. Secretary, so I want to ask about others in your party, leaders in the Republican Party, what they're saying. First, this is the House Speaker, Paul Ryan. Listen to this.
He should step aside. Number one, these allegations are credible. Number two, he should if he cares about the values and the people he claims to care about, then he should step aside.
And President Trump's daughter and advisor, Ivanka Trump, she's spoken out as well, saying, and I'll put it up on the screen, there's a special place in hell for people who prey on children. I've yet to see a valid explanation, and I have no reason to doubt the victims' accounts. So what's your reaction when you hear those Republicans, the daughter of the president, the House Speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader, for that matter, when they offer those opinions?
Well, I think those individuals and all individuals are entitled to their own opinions about what's actually occurring. I think one of the things that you need to remember and that your viewers would know is that the people of Alabama are not going to support a candidate that has been identified as committing these crimes against women at any time in his life, crimes that have been proven to be true, that this individual would have been convicted of, and still support that individual for elective office at any level in our state. The thing that's so unfortunate about what has occurred in this particular incident is that we don't know whether or not these allegations are true. There doesn't appear to be enough time to have them properly vetted, and so people have to take the information that's introduced to them, try to process it, try to hear the responses that are given, and still determine whether or not they want to support Judge Moore or whether they want to support another candidate, either the Democrat Doug Jones or a write-in candidate of their choice. But the information that continues to come in from the national commentators is not helping to clear up the situation. In many ways, it has intended to cloud up the situation, and that's been very difficult because information continues to come up about what people can do to influence our elections, or how ballot position can change, or that an election can be stalled, or that new names could be introduced, and none of those things are true, and that's very disturbing.
But it's not just national commentators. This is the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader. These are the Republican leaders here in Washington who are very, very strongly speaking out.
Obviously, yes, sir, their position is try to save the seat and to try to make sure that the Republican majority is preserved. But that is only going to happen if Judge Roy Moore wins the election, because there's no way that a substitute can be provided, and he is the standard bearer for the party at this particular time and through December the 12th.
John Merrill is the Secretary of State of Alabama. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for allowing me to be your guest today.
The president's son-in-law now under fire again, accused of not turning over documents related to the Russia investigation. How many passes will he get? We'll be right back. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, is turning up the heat on the Trump campaign. He's issued a subpoena for more Russia-related documents because he doesn't think they've turned over everything. At the same time, the Senate Judiciary Committee is asking Jared Kushner to turn over more documents as well. Members say records released by others in the campaign show Kushner received and forwarded emails about WikiLeaks and a so-called Russian backdoor overture and dinner invite. But those emails were not included in the batch Kushner turned over to the committee. Now they want to know why and if there's anything else Kushner left out. Let's bring back our panel. Laura, what do you make of this new subpoena from Robert Mueller and the implication of Kushner's failing to turn over those other emails to the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Well, I'm surprised this record keeps skipping for Jared Kushner. Why is there continuing to be a trickling down of information about whether or not you've handed over comprehensive information? On the other hand, from Mueller's position, remember the greatest thing about his particular probe is the grand jury. They have subpoena power, and the purpose of subpoena power is to be able to get information, to get the documents, to get witnesses to come in and testify. And so as you're wrapping up any grand jury investigation or in the midst of one, you want to capitalize on the availability of that subpoena power. This could very well be a cleanup measure to say, I want to make sure we are capitalizing on this subpoena power and we're going to get everything we need. It may or may not be a reflection that they don't think they have quite everything for the specific person. It may more be that they want to get the subpoena power to be, comprehensive. On the other hand, this is a pattern that invites so much scrutiny and speculation. And frankly, this selective amnesia that keeps happening, especially in light of all of these controversies, WikiLeaks just last week with Donald Trump Jr., this is not a novel concept. You would think to yourself, oh, WikiLeaks. That was a problem with somebody a couple days ago. I remember this conversation in my own life. It's surprising they failed to do so.
You know, Rick, hold on a second. Rick, I got the letter here from the chairman, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. People, you know, Chuck Grassley's the Republican, Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat. And it's a tough letter to Abby Lowell, the lawyer representing Jared Kushner. I'll read one line to you. Other parties have produced documents concerning a, quote, Russian backdoor overture and dinner invite, which Mr. Kushner also forwarded. And they say, why didn't you forward that?
And yet his lawyer maintains they forwarded it. They produced everything. So I don't understand it. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world if you're under this type of investigation. Abby Lowell's a seasoned guy, a lawyer. Just air and turning more over as opposed to less. That's why I just don't get it.
Because it does raise, David, suspicions that it's not the first time. There have been at least 3 or 4 or 5 other cases where documents that were supposed to be handed over were not handed over, but then eventually they were handed over.
We have a series of revelations that we can't, sitting here, put together and make a determination about. But what we know is there's a revelation after the administration writ large says, oh, nothing here, no collusion, no cooperation, Russia was nothing. Oh, well, that thing, yeah, but that's nothing. Oh, that thing, oh, yeah, that's nothing either. The real problem is, from the very top, the President of the United States has said publicly this whole thing is a joke and that it's just a hit job by the Democrats. So where is the pressure down the line for people to actually be transparent about what context they may have had, innocuous or not? I mean, Rick said, I mean, Abby Lowell, I know, Jamie Gorelick, who represented Jared Kushner. I mean, these are fine lawyers. So, and there could always be lapses in the lawyering or in the disclosure, or there could be bad clients who are not putting over what they ought to.
You know, it's interesting, Anna, because Senator Lindsey Graham, man, you know, well, he just issued another statement saying President Trump has a blind spot when it comes to Russia and he can't figure out why. Can you?
Maybe because they have something on him. I mean, you know, it leads to speculation. The constant and the very consistent way that Donald Trump deals with Russia, deals with this investigation, leads to questions that are yet to be answered. And you've got Lindsey Graham, who takes this issue incredibly seriously, but is also, in a very goodwill way, trying to work with Trump. Now, Trump doesn't only have a blind spot when it comes to Russia, he's got a blind spot when it comes to his relatives. Because this stuff with Jared Kushner, I'm not sure that in any other presidency, somebody would be allowed to stay in the inner circle of the Oval Office of the White House with the amount of lapses, lies, lack of disclosure that this young man has exhibited. I mean, he's either negligent and sloppy, lying, or has the worst case of early onset memory loss that we've seen in history. He should go see a doctor.
Yeah, I think that I really believe that Donald Trump is acting the way he is because I don't think he believes there was any Russian collusion, because I don't think he was involved in any of it. He probably knew nothing about it. And I think for him to react this way, given his reactions on other things, that whether we're true or not, in this case, I think he feels he did nothing wrong, he knew nothing about it, and he's reacting accordingly. So I think just the opposite. I think if there was something there, I don't think he'd be acting.
You think that when he called out on Russia to look out for the 33,000 emails of Hillary, that was just coincidence? He just pulled out one country out of thin air?
If I was doing something colluding with the Russians, the last thing I'd be doing is publicly out there talking about colluding with the Russians.
You could be right, and that would still be an appropriate response, because there may have been collusion that he didn't know about. There could still be a crime that was very close to him, and he's saying this whole thing is a joke.
I accept that as a possibility, but I think he doesn't see it that way.
Well, the notion that there's no there is one you can use in a tagline, but it's not one that's going to placate Robert Mueller or a special counsel. Because the more you tell me not to think about an elephant, guess what? The only thing I can picture, an elephant. And the more you tell me that I have forgotten about this issue and I didn't realize about that, I invite scrutiny, I invite speculation, and the magnifying glass that's above Jared Kushner, the inner circle of Trump, gets bigger and bigger because of self-inflicted wounds. And remember, a lot of the things that people do, and they assume that, oh, it'd be so silly if one were to have been involved in collusion to have done just that. Well, you overestimate the logic of somebody who's an alleged criminal. People make a whole host of mistakes. And of course, Mueller's team and special counsel, their entire job as investigators is to find out about those moments of stupidity.
I just want to wrap this up. Our Jeremy Diamond just got a statement from Ty Cobb, the president's personal attorney, saying this: President is paying his own legal fees, as was always his preference. He does not want to deplete any funds that may be available to assist current and former staffers. The administration and others are working with the Office of Government Ethics and tax specialists to create a lawful mechanism for payment of fees for staffers. It is expected to be operational shortly. That statement from the president's lawyer, Ty Cobb. Everybody stand by. There's much more news happening, including some fireworks right now up on Capitol Hill.
How many times do we do this before we learn this?
Listen, I've honored you by allowing you to spout off here. And what you said was not right.
Two senators fighting over the Republican tax bill. Who's right? We're going to check the facts. Senate Republicans are one step closer with their tax bill. The Senate Finance Committee advanced the plan, but not before concerns over tax cuts erupted into a shouting match. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio accused Republicans of only trying to cut taxes for the rich. That was the last straw for Republican Senator Orrin Hatch.
I just think it would be nice just tonight, before we go home, to just acknowledge, well, this tax cut really is not for the middle class, it's for the rich. And that whole thing about higher wages, well, it's a good selling point, but we know companies don't just give away higher wages. They just don't give away higher wages just because they have more money. Corporations are sitting on a lot of money now. They're sitting on a lot of profits now. I don't see wages going up. So just spare us the bank shots, spare us the sarcasm and the satire, and
I'm
let's
going to
move
spare it,
forward.
but I'm going to just say to you that I come from the poor people. And I've been here working my whole stinking career for people who don't have a chance. And I really resent anybody saying that I'm just doing this for the rich. Give me a break. I think you guys overplay that all the time, and it gets old. And frankly, you ought to quit it.
Mr. Chairman, the public
wait a
believes
minute. Just, I'm not through. Okay. I get kind of sick and tired of it. True, it's a nice political play.
Well, Mr.
But
Chairman,
it's not true.
with all due respect, I get sick and tired of the richest people
Regular
in
order,
this country
Mr. Chairman.
getting richer and
Regular
richer
order.
and richer.
Order.
We do a tax
Regular order.
middle class
Wait a minute,
Regular order.
and over and over again.
Wait just
How
a
many
second.
times do we do this before we learn this?
Listen, I've honored you by allowing you to spout off here. And what you said was not right. That's all I'm saying. I come from the lower middle class originally. We didn't have anything. So don't spew that stuff on me. I get a little tired of that crap. And let me just say something. If we worked together, we could pull this country out of every mess it's in. And we could do a lot of the things that you're talking about, too. And I think I've got a reputation of having worked together with Democrats.
Let's start with Chip.
I'm not starting with Chip. I did it. I've done it for years. I've got more bills.
Start with Chip today.
I got more bills passed than everybody on this committee put together. And they've been passed for the benefit of people in this country. Now, all I can say is I like you personally very much, but I'm telling you, this bull crap that you guys throw out here really gets old after a while. To do it right at the end of this was just not right. And it takes a lot to get me worked up like this.
CHIP, by the way, is the Children's Health Insurance Program. Senator Brown, by the way, wasn't finished tweeting this morning, quote, "People deserve to know what's in the committee bill passed late last night. Instead of taking our amendments to cut taxes for the middle class, it takes away health care, raises premiums, and cuts Medicare, all to pay for tax cuts for corporations." Let's bring in our congressional reporter, Lauren Fox, to talk about this Republican tax plan that just passed the committee in the Senate. So is Senator Brown correct?
Well, there are two things that this bill does that Democrats say are bad for the middle class. The first thing is that it repeals the individual mandate. And the official scorekeepers in Congress, this gets a little complicated, actually scored that as a tax increase on the lowest income Americans in the country. And the reason for that is that if you take away the requirement that people have health insurance, then they won't be necessarily getting it, and therefore they won't be getting the tax subsidies, therefore they will see a tax increase. Republicans, of course, argue that's a major problem, because if they aren't getting a tax they are choosing not to have health insurance, then that's not really a tax increase. The other major thing is that a lot of the individual tax cuts actually sunset for the middle class. Republicans say again, look, Republicans and Democrats are never going to actually let those tax cuts expire for the middle class. But Democrats say, unless you're in power, how do you know?
Yeah, because they sunset or they lapse after 10 years. Absolutely. But a lot of the big taxes for corporations, for example, they continue indefinitely. That's permanent. A big issue. All right, Lauren, thanks very much for that. Coming up, new allegations against the Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, for chartering private travel on the taxpayer's dime. We have details. Stay with us. A watchdog agency is slamming the Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke for his agency's record-keeping or lack thereof. He's under investigation for using non-commercial aircraft and who paid for his wife to accompany him on official travel. Our CNN correspondent Tom Foreman is following this story for us. So what is happening? What is the latest?
Well, you know, the fundamental issue here is, are these cabinet members using private flights when they could get a commercial flight, or military flights when they get a commercial flight? And secondarily, are they doing it for actual business, or are they just kind of pretending they're going for business and they're using it for private travel or for fundraising or something else? In the case of Secretary Zinke, take a look at the numbers we're talking about here. At least 3 charter flights, several uses of military and government aircraft, and so far the cost is close to $73,000 of taxpayer money that he has spent this way. He has been very bullish about this, saying, look, it's a bunch of BS, to quote him, to say that there's any problem here, and listen to his explanation about how he gets this cleared.
Every time I travel, I submit the travel plan to the ethics department that evaluates it line by line to make sure that I am above the law and I follow the law.
So that's the end of September. He's saying every time he travels, it's well documented. But now, look at what his own department's inspector general is saying in this memo that she put out. Mary Kendall is saying our investigation has been delayed by absent or incomplete documentation for several pertinent trips and review process that failed to include proper documentation and accountability. Some of the secretary's staff over there is trying to say basically this is, well, there's a messy system left over from the Obama administration. It's not our fault. It's all going to be accounted for. It's all okay. But this has been this persistent problem for these cabinet members. We know that Tom Price, he got booted out of this basically around the time this investigation started. Scott Pruitt, Steve Mnuchin, all of these folks have had questions raised about them, and those questions are not going away on a commercial or a private flight.
I suspect all of them are a little bit more cautious now in doing private charters.
One would think.
Because of all of the commotion that it has generated. Tom Foreman, thanks very much. President Trump blasting Senator Al Franken over his sexual harassment scandal, but still silent on the multiple sexual accusations against Republican Senate candidate in Alabama, Roy Moore. The latest when we come back.